meeting of May 12th. This is an electronic virtual meeting. It's being conducted by means of electronic participation by a majority of council members as permitted by Section 238, 3.3 of the Municipal Act 2001 as amended, as there is presently an emergency declared to exist in the town of Mono, being the COVID-19 pandemic. Council chambers is not open to the public. So in attendance, we have the opportunity that anybody can view the live streaming on our Mono Civic website portal. So I just want to confirm quorum. We have pre-notified that Fred Nix will be hopefully joining us later on after 10. We have Deputy Mayor Creelman, Councillor Ralph Magtalo, Councillor Sharon Martin, and myself, Mayor Laura Ryan. We also have connected with our CAO, Mark Early, our Deputy Clerk, Fred Simpson, our Director of Public Works, Mike Dunmore, our Director of Planning, Dave Trotman, and our Treasurer, Les Saluka, and our Recreation Director, Kim Keaton. So if we're ready to start, disclosure of pecuniary interest can be made at any time throughout the meeting, and it must be also declared in writing to the Deputy Clerk. So that's for council members. And as far as to start the meeting, that we approve the agenda of session VC4-2020 as circulated. Could I have a mover? Moved by Creelman and seconded by Magtalo. Any discussion, deletions, additions? Seeing none, then call for the vote. I'll do that verbally. Deputy Mayor, how do you vote?
Yes.
And Councillor Magtalo?
Yes.
And Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Okay, so that carries. The next item is the approval of the previous minutes. Minutes of session VC3-2020 as circulated. Could I have a mover? Moved by Martin and seconded by Magtalo. Any discussion on the minutes? And I'll call for the vote then. Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Councillor Magtalo?
Yes.
Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Okay, that carries. And so now we're into questions submitted online in advance for public question period. So Mr. Stimson, could you provide us with any questions that have been received?
We received one question submitted in advance, and no one has contacted the town asking to join in on this meeting from the public. The question that we received is from Angela Banks, and she asked, is dialogue with the town of Orangeville with regards to the Hanson development continuing? And is council aware of slight reduction of numbers of units, but no change to the footprint of the development?
And so I guess I should ask then, Mr. Trotman, have you had any updates from this application from the town of Orangeville?
I haven't received any paper circulation related reports at this time, but I had a discussion a couple of weeks ago with the Director of Planning there, following a request from our Deputy Mayor for an update related to a neighborhood residential meeting update, I believe, a virtual meeting update. The official plan amendment itself, the amendment to the official plan has been withdrawn because there is apparently now a change in the density to conform to what was approved in the Orangeville official plan some years ago. But the zoning bylaw remains in place for review, as does the site plan control application. And at this time, I believe there's work being undertaken to craft what would be preliminary conditions of approval, draft approval, as part of that development. With respect to the configuration, that'll be a site plan matter, but the density, based on my discussion with their director of planning, is it is now in conforming on the OPA side of things. There's still a zoning bylaw amendment required, though.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Simpson, how will we be able to respond back to this question? Do you have the contact information?
Yes, I'm just checking to see. We have anyone who's asked for responses has provided contact information, and I've always sent an email back to the person, as well as including it in both council highlights and the minutes.
Okay, so then you'll be able to do that response with the assistance of Mr. Trotman, and then that will be sent as soon as it's available.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Just a question for Mr. Trotman. Is there any form of hold on the development process here remaining now that the application has been modified?
I do have some notes. I don't have them right on me at hand, but there was a discussion, I believe, with Mr. Ward, the director, about the zoning, as I recall, could have a hold on it. I believe that's under consideration as part of the zoning amendment.
And have we seen any report of the Credit Valley Conservation Authority yet? I know that was a major outstanding item.
The reports are online. There was only one report that was peer reviewed, and that was the traffic impact study. The rest were done in-house. But they apparently are, I'm going to use the word happy, but they're at this point substantively satisfied with the proposal as now revised. That's my understanding.
Yes, but the Credit Valley was separate and apart from the town's own review. And the last I heard was that it had not been released as of yet. Is that correct, or am I?
Did their comments have not been released?
The Credit Valley comments.
My understanding from their director is that they've had technical comments submitted from CIBC as part of the application.
Okay.
I'll double check with Mr. Ward on that, but that's my recollection of our conversation was that they had.
Okay.
All right then, so we will move on. Then we do have the delegation scheduled for 9:15, but we're only 4 minutes away from that. So with council's approval, we'll ask Mr. MacKay to start his presentation. Everyone all right with that? Looks okay. That's great. Okay, so Will, thank you very much for the time that you're taking today, and please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Council. I appreciate you having me in your virtual meeting today. What we're here to talk about is normally what we speak of in March, and it is the performance for the Corporation of the Town of Mono accounts that we have managed by myself and my team at CIBC with Gundy. We do this in conjunction with Les Luca, the treasurer, of course, and all decisions are made at the town level before execution on anything. So what we'll speak of right here, again, is briefly pretty standard agenda that we have. I will reintroduce myself for anybody watching on the virtual web that does not know who we are. We will speak about the current interest rate market update that we have. We'll talk about the account returns that we have, a portfolio maturity allocation that we have delegated for the account, then the composition that we have, and we'll talk a little bit about bonds versus bond funds, again, and why it's relevant in this sort of situation, and any closing remarks and questions that come. Again, my name is Will MacKay. I am an investment advisor and portfolio manager with CIBC Wood Gundy. We have 6 members on our team, 3 investment advisors and 3 assistants for our team. We have the largest team in the Mississauga office, and we do this because of the capacity to manage our clients and the service level that we anticipate continuing maintaining. This, of course, is just an introduction of the additional services that our team does offer. And again, here we'll list our pieces. We don't only work with just our individuals here. We work with all of our members, your lawyers, accountants, and anybody else that would require our assistance and service with the account. I'll talk briefly here about historical bond rates. I do talk about this all the time, and I would like to say somewhere right around here was the anticipated bottom that we had, and we were anticipating that interest rates, of course, were going to rise for the next foreseeable future. We all know that that did not happen right now, and we have actually hit a historic low in the Canadian government bond rate when the Canadian government slashed interest rates by 1.5% in March. Now, we want to talk about what is the impact to that on the portfolio. In the short term, it's been very negligible, and the reason for that is we had built a resilient portfolio that is laddered with maturities spread between 1 and 5 years. So the impact is very low, but the portion that we need to talk about is forward-looking. I would say the way I drive, I look through the windshield, not the rear view. So what we want to do is we want to anticipate what is coming at us. We are looking at historic lows on an ongoing basis. Now, we'll talk about what we had done to provide some resilience to the portfolio for this. But this is going to be the new low. And I would speak to this one is our forecast right here. Interest rates came down, and this is the ongoing forecast, which is extremely flat for at least the next year. The government has made the position that they would like to not cut interest rates anymore. They will look to do other options. They have done that for the first time ever by purchasing bonds, very similar to the US program that the Fed introduced in 2008 and again reenacted during this system. So they will look to do additional measures instead of going negative in their interest rates. But on the for the foreseeable future, we do not anticipate interest rates rising in any degree for at least the next year. We'll talk here about the performance of the accounts that we have. We'll talk briefly about the 1 year and what we have. What did we do last year? Interest rates were rising, and we were able to capitalize on some of that by locking in some of our interest rates to fixed term maturities. And we had, through conjunction with Les Luca as well, we discussed the possibility of rising interest rates and the proverbial bird in the hand versus two in the bush. We had taken some decisive action during the end of 2018 and through 2019 to crystallize and secure some of those longer term interest rates. And additional to this one, we have a portion of the account that is in our principal protected notes that participate in the equity. And last year, of course, having such a great increase, we participated in that as well. What this has done is long term. In the last 5 years, we've been able to outpace our benchmark by approximately 0.6% for a total rate of return increase of over 3.3%. And we compare this against the short-term bond index, which is a 1 to 5 year laddered investment grade bond index, which is the index that we are benchmarked against. And as well, we do it against the one investment program, which is a municipal investment program available to municipalities. And we have outpaced their short-term bond investment program by a material 1% over 5 years. And we have done this while maintaining maturities to our account and owning every single item in the account. Year to date, what I'll speak of here is what has the impact of the COVID-19 impact been on our portfolio. It has been negligible from a principal position. We have not taken any material loss in the portfolio. We have given back a small portion of our equity gains, and I will speak to that. We're confident that the recovery in that is 100% due to the principal guarantees built into that. And if we understand most of the relationship to bonds, when interest rates rise, the value of your bond portfolio goes down, and the inverse works. When interest rates rise, the value of your portfolio goes up. What we had done is we had, through the last year, in anticipation of rising interest rates and the possibility that we would have loss against the portfolio from rising interest rates, we had built in some security through some fixed rate return vehicles such as GICs, which do not fluctuate when interest rates change. Therefore, when interest rates actually fell, they did not participate in that program, but we're confident in the return, which is 2.75 and 3% respectively, which we have locked in for the next few years. This is the portfolio allocation that we have developed and maintained strictly through the last few years. We have a portion of our programs coming due in 2020, 2021, 2022, 23, and 24. I'll speak to right here what we did last year, 2018 and 2019, through the conversations with Les and myself and viewing the planning that was required for the town over the next few years. We had actually increased our allocation to our farthest reaching maturities, which is 5 years, which we could get. And the reason for that is we had what we considered statistically outsized rates of return at that moment. They were coming in far exceeding what we considered to be the relevant rates at that time. As I said, 2.75 and 3%, which we've locked in for the next few years. That will give us the ability to maintain an increased rate of return on the portfolio, which I will speak of. Here, of course, is our structured note program, which is built into our principal protected programs. These, again, in the structured note program are on rolling maturities as well. Our first maturity is not coming due until 2023, so we have significant amount of time for recovery in those programs. I'll speak here to the portfolio composition that we have built. What we have here is what's called modified duration, weighted terms, and weighted average to maturity. Modified duration is essentially how sensitive the portfolio is to changing interest rates. If we had a 1% rise and or fall in interest rates, it would affect the portfolio 3% in either direction. If you see here, weighted terms, where average maturity is roughly around 3.2 years, and our weighted average yield to maturity is 2.57. And what that means right now is we have locked in essentially a 2.5% rate of return if we hold all of these to maturity. You'll see right down here, these are the coupons that we were able to purchase. And right down here, we'll speak to some of the GICs that we purchased. We locked in these rates until 2024. Essentially guaranteeing that interest rate with very little interest rate fluctuation, and here as well at 3% till 2021. Again, these are not interest rate sensitive products, and we did this because at the time we had anticipated that we had topped out on some interest rates and we wanted to take advantage of those. What we have, let me see here, excuse me. This is what happened in March and how did it affect our portfolio. This is the reason that we have some short-term underperformance for the first 3 months is because this is one of our principal protected notes. It is purchased for $100, 100 cents on the dollar. It is guaranteed by this one by CIBC, but we own ones from BMO and TD as well. I use the CIBC one because it's the most current reference. This line here is the reference portfolio, which here is based on Royal Bank of Canada, TD Bank of Nova Scotia, Bank of Montreal, National Bank. And you can see in March, as equity markets sold off, so too did the value of the underlying portfolio. However, this blue line that is here is the actual price that is pricing right now. It's currently at 92 cents, 92.8 cents on the dollar. We have until 2024 for this to mature. At January 19, 2024, we will recover to 100 cents on the dollar. Therefore, we will make back $7.20 in a worst case scenario. Over a rolling 5-year period, the Canadian financial banking institutions have never shown a negative rate of return. Therefore, we are quite confident that we will have the ability to produce not only just a recovery of principal, but a material gain on our portfolio for both sides of those. So while we've locked in right now a 2.5% rate of return on our bond portfolios, we do anticipate that we will not only recover, but will benefit from the principal protection programs. We anticipate that it will produce approximately a 0.5% net benefit to the portfolio over the long term. It's not going to magically take a 2.5% to 5%, but we anticipate it will take that 2.5% to a 3%, and will provide some cushion to the town, understanding that the budget requires a 2.5% rate of return. We've been able to guarantee that with our fixed income side of the portfolio. We expect to give a little added benefit with the principal protected notes. What we'll talk about here again is bonds versus bond funds. Predictability. We know what we own. We can see it mature. If we require any income to the portfolio, I'm in constant contact with our town treasurer to ensure if there are any budgetary requirements that require liquidating any portion of the portfolio, we can either let it naturally mature or we can pick what we want to dispose of. Cost efficiency is significantly lower. The cost of the one portfolio that we spoke of earlier is approximately 0.6%. We come in at anywhere from 0.1 to 0.15 for our bond portion of the portfolio. It's significantly less, and we have actually outpaced their portfolio by a material degree. And again, that flexibility allows us the opportunity to own, know, and see everything that we have in our portfolio, with the opportunity to change anything that is required or be opportunistic like we did during 2018-19. That is all I have. If there are any questions, I would be more than happy to take them.
Any questions from councillors? Yes, Councillor Mangtolo?
Thanks, Will. That's a nice explanation. VICs, was that the upper left corner there, about 20% or so of that pie chart?
No, that was our structured notes that we have here, our structured notes.
Yeah, what is
we
that?
have our structured notes here is our principal protected notes here. They're classified here. We don't classify them as pure fixed income. It is an underlying bond component, but it has an equity participation. We, years ago, had developed a strategy to increase the overall total rate of return for the portfolio due to what we had considered at the time also historic low interest rates, which continued to drive down. And what we have done is we've constantly and consistently used these programs throughout different municipal programs, foundations, and charitable trust to add a level of equity participation without taking any actual principal risk to the portfolio, because capital preservation is the most important thing that we have. Our three most important principles that we work on in conjunction with the treasurer are principal protection and adherence to the Act. These programs here are compliant with the Act. Number two is liquidity, or access to our portfolio if we need something. Getting a great rate of returns is not as relevant as getting access to the portfolio should we require it in emergency situations. And lastly, getting a great rate of return. So we believe these programs fit all three of those criterias, and they will add a little bit of extra, which is why we cap them at 20% of the portfolio is a maximum. And what we do is each time that funds are invested here from the bank account, we take them and we split them in a staggered maturity, with portions going in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a portion going to our long-term principal protected notes that we have here.
And how much does the municipality have invested with you? What's the total?
Just over $15 million at this moment.
I was
Spread
surprised
through
at that number.
all the accounts. Pardon me?
I was surprised at that number. I didn't realize we had that much
Well, that covers a variety of different accounts right now. That's the operating accounts, that's the development accounts, that's the gas tax accounts, that's the parks account. That covers all of them. So we treat them all in a similar fashion, but we do treat each account separately.
and the reserve account.
Correct.
What is your management cost?
As I mentioned earlier, it is approximately 0.1 to 0.15 per transaction. We charge on a transactional basis, not a management cost. And we do that because the strategy is a buy and hold strategy. Therefore, ongoing maintenance to the account is, I'm not going to say limited. We are constantly watching the portfolio, but daily maintenance is not as important to the portfolio because of the buy and hold strategy. So what we do is we tie our purchases to any projects that are upcoming for the town that's going to be required, firstly, and secondly, we will provide a significant amount of liquidity to the portfolio by buying a 1 to 5 year laddered strategy. So therefore, we charge on a per transactional basis and hold to maturity. If there's no sales in the portfolio, there's no additional cost to the portfolio.
Thank you.
Yes, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Will. Just to the question of your management fee, it's 0.1% of the value of the transaction or the value of the portfolio?
Thank you. It's the value of the transaction per year. So, for
Okay.
example, if it's 0.15% on $100,000 for 5 years, it's $150 times 5.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of Will? Seeing none, thank you very much, Will, for attending us at this time and through this process. We appreciate the clarity in which you provide us the information we need. So stay safe, and we look forward to working with you again.
Thank you. Thank you. I've always enjoyed working with the town, and especially Les and Mark. So I'd like to thank them for their contributions that they have and their constant communication. So thank you, everybody. Stay safe. Enjoy the rest of council. And next time, I hope to see everybody in person.
Yes, and we as well. Thank you.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Okay, so now we'll go on with unfinished business. So the first item is a list of unfinished and deferred council business that was provided with the package. Are there any questions or comments on the list? Yes, Councillor McTillow?
Just for clarity, now, my understanding, this is the first time we've had the list posted, is that any member of council can request something to go on the list.
Correct.
And to have it removed from the list, it has to be a decision of the whole council,
Right.
right?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
That's my understanding too. So I'm wondering, we have 3 items on there right now. I'm wondering how they got there. I'm also wondering if it wouldn't be a good idea that if one person can put something on the list, if we didn't do it in camera at a council meeting for transparency. So it's 2 questions. How did those 3 items get there? And what's our best way of doing this going forward?
Okay, so Mr. Early, did you want to help us out here?
Sure. Just obviously, this was our first attempt at it. So we have an ongoing to-do list that we had been circulating out, and it's a complete staff list. So it goes after each meeting, it gets updated on all of the issues that have come up at council. So everyone knows where they're or what issues they have to deal with. So we took what was actually directed by council by resolution or formal direction within the minutes, and we've put it on this list. I think we recognize we may not have caught everything. It is the first go round that we've done it this way, so we're certainly willing to add anything that council sees that needs to go on. I am concerned that you said you only have 3 items on your list. I count 10.
There are quite a few.
Oh, yes, I do have more, Mark, and I'm sorry you're cutting out, but the last one I saw there was the fire mark, and I now see the other issues. So in future, is it your thought that you would put on, or that? I'm sorry,
Ralph? there's 2 pages to the
Yes,
document.
I'm going to close this up because I'm cutting out.
Okay,
I think I've got too much on.
okay.
Could
So
you mind repeating that, Laura?
okay, so there is 2 pages to this document. So there are, the first page has got the 3 items ending in fire mark. And then the next page has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the 7th item is the CBC noise exemption.
So in the future going forward, are we going to follow the motion which council puts items on there, or are we going to carry on with the staff and inserting them? And also, I'll preface this by saying I don't have strong feelings about this at all, but the way the motion is made out, it's council is supposed to, any member of council can apply an item to the list.
And I think we are trying to go through this process just to be as open as we can in terms of allowing opportunities for council members to bring items forward as they would like to have something addressed. And if council is in approval of having that done, research by staff or possibly research by a committee, then I think it's fair that it goes on the list. And if it's a council direction, it goes on the list. So I'm quite comfortable letting it happen and see how it works out. If we're having any problems, we can always come back and readdress how we're adding and deleting any item. Is that okay?
Well, I think the motion doesn't read that way. And
Okay.
we have the motion there to give us direction. Don, do you want to comment on that? I think it's your motion.
The intent of the motion was that it was really council's list of issues, and that any individual member of council could add an issue, and it would take a majority of council to be satisfied sufficient to remove an issue. I think what's happened here is that staff has anticipated certain issues that have come up from time to time and put together this list. It pretty much parallels what I would want to see on the list. So I'm prepared to see this list as a means of kickstarting the process, so long as it's understood that we individually can add matters to the list and take a collective decision as to when items come off the list.
Are you all right with that, Ralph?
I'm okay with it. I think it's a start. It's a good way to get started. So I'd like to go to one other issue with respect to the list. The purpose of the list here was to keep things front and center. I think that's your term, actually, John. And to items that we wanted to be reminded about. And so there's one item here that I don't see fits it with that, and that's the fire mark. I don't think that we want to keep that front and center or be reminded about it. We deferred the decision. We recognized that it was going to cost at least I did recognize it was going to cost our residents more than it would save them. And so we didn't go ahead on it. So I don't think that's an issue that is worth having on the list. So that given that the way this reads now, we have to have all of council or a majority of council agree with me. That's my understanding.
Right.
I would agree with you, Ralph.
Yeah, and I agree too. How about you, Sharon? Are you all right to delete the fire mark item?
Yes.
Okay, so there you go.
Done.
Okay. So is there any items that any member wanted to add? No, nothing at this time? Okay, yeah. We'll move on to the second item, which is the motion to install traffic safety signage on Airport Road. Deputy Mayor, you had brought this forward.
Yes, I brought it forward in response to an email that I received from the county, which explained why the electronic sign had been removed back in March. And due to when we would ever see that sign again, at least during the COVID crisis, and in particular, the sign is being used at the county works yard to publicize testing at headwaters. I thought we should once again visit the question of whether we need and want permanent signage there that isn't subject to the whim of the county in terms of moving around to solve other issues. So, and I know that many residents would like to see a restoration of a sign. I think it should be maybe worded a bit differently than the old sign. But we right now are at the mercy of whatever the county wants to do with its electronic sign. And I think that's a vulnerable place to be. Also, the number of charges and examples of stunt racing and reckless driving are increasing, frankly, during this time. There's some horrific things going on out there, especially on nice weekends.
Okay, discussion on this item? Councillor Martin?
Well, we have been around this many times, and actually, I think that if we want a sign there, that we should work with the county to have it worded the way we want, but it needs to be a county sign. It can't be a mono sign if it's on a county road. And as far as the speeding goes, it's no different the speeding above 89 than it is below 89. And we all heard in the news about some terrible stunt driving in the city this past weekend. That was a miracle that no one was killed. And I heard Doug Ford talking about somebody traveling at over 300. I mean, really, that's disgusting. So it's not, we take this very personally because it's Airport Road, which is right in the middle of Mono. But I think we need to work together. Maybe MTO should be part of this too. It's a shame that Airport Road belongs to the county anyway. It's such a main thoroughfare. It should be a provincial road. But that being said, it is a county road. I think we need, if we want a sign there, we can work together to get that done. And certainly not the wording that was on it before, which could have led to lawsuits or who knows what, because it was very dramatic. And I don't think we need that. We need people to be thinking about other people on the road and themselves. So I would hope that we could work together with the county to prepare maybe a permanent sign. It's fine to have the electronic one, but we're not going to have that for a while, I'd say. And maybe we need to work on a permanent sign together. Thank
you. Councillor McClellan?
Thank you, Your Honor. John, I appreciate that you have worked hard on this, and it's a frustrating thing to have the thing disappear. I'm wondering if we've adequately used the usual means of phone calls and a little bit of moral persuasion to try and get this done, rather than a motion of council. I was successful before to get the temporary sign. I recognize it wasn't everything that we wanted. I live just down the road from this. I really like the old sign. I agree with Sharon Martin that it was it really caught your eye, and made you think, and we haven't had it now for many years. I think we do need a sign there. I think that we could do with this without a motion of council, which says that the town of Monora insists upon reinstallation. I think it sounds like a little child being petulant, and so I prefer not to have it as a motion. But John, I see you smiling. Maybe you've already dealt with the county and have been unsuccessful, and could you give us some background on that?
Deputy Mayor?
I have had shall we say, a challenging time attempting to get the county to be responsive on a number of issues. And there's also a question of speed limits on Hockley Road. And I thought that the motion would communicate our seriousness about this matter. The question, as you know, has been around for some time, and it died down completely so long as the electronic sign was in position and was working. I think most people were satisfied with that, especially when the messaging on that sign took on a more pointed form. I'm happy to table my own motion or have the motion tabled so long as it is communicated to the Director of Public Works of the county as a tabled motion, because I want to get their attention. And to Sharon's point, absolutely nothing is going to happen there without cooperation of the county. I agree 100% with you. But I don't think they have grasped the seriousness of the issue. If they had, I think they would have approached us and said, listen, we want to redeploy that electronic sign for another purpose, a worthy purpose, and this is how long we're going to need it. Instead, to the best of my knowledge, there was no notice on the relocation of the sign. It simply vanished one day. So I'm happy to see this tabled, but I think we should be communicating firmly with the Director of Public Works at the county.
Yesterday I did contact Scott Burns and asked him about the issue and where he felt things had ended. And his response was that having a meeting between Nikki Randall from OPP, yourself, Deputy Mayor, Ann Butler, and Mike Walker from Police Service Board, and Scott Burns, that it was decided that a permanent sign was not going to make any difference. So the issue of having the electronic sign was the final action that the county had done. Now, if the problem is that we want to have the electronic sign permanent, then I think as a municipality, we would have to possibly go into a cost sharing to have the purchase of a sign that we know will always be there. Is one way of trying to solve this problem. But that was the response that I got with speaking with Scott. And if his memory is different than what yours is, Deputy Mayor, then we may need to have another combined meeting to talk this through and see what we can come up with.
If I may, my recollection was that the outcome was presented to us as an alternative. In other words, the electronic sign as opposed to re-erection of a permanent sign. And the stumbling block was the wording on the permanent sign. There were some people who thought that it should be replicated and updated. And I agree with Sharon that it had wording on it that became dated very quickly, given the fact that it was trying to communicate statistics in terms of crashes and fatalities. I think we need another meeting because there were strong views that the wording of a permanent sign should not reflect what had been there for some 20 years. By the same token, The original sign came down, again, without notice, as far as I understand. And we were all satisfied with the compromise being the electronic sign. My point is that maybe we can't depend on that electronic sign anymore, and maybe we need to find another solution.
Okay, so would you think it would be advisable for me to contact Scott Burns again and ask him for a virtual meeting, or do you want him to present as a delegation to council as to what our options could be? Would you, members of council, be willing to co-own a sign with the county? I don't know what the cost of the signs are. Yeah, do you know, Sharon?
No, no idea how much it would cost, but I think for us to be represented and for the county to be satisfied, it has to be something that we both can look at and feel this is the right sign in the right place. So if it costs us money, if we have to share the cost, I think that that's probably the best way to go. We're in the game.
Right. Yeah,
We can if we want, we can move on from there.
right.
We have
Okay, Mr. Early, are you still on?
I am here, yep.
Okay, do you have any idea just offhand what one of those signs is and what it would cost?
I don't know specifically. I'm wondering if Mike might know. I think he did some investigation for signage down on in the Brookfield area, but I'm not sure how far he went with it.
Okay, Mike, are you still on? Yeah, you are.
So council's talking about an electronic sign, am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah, the one that was on Airport Road, county owned and erected right in front of the Remax building.
So the trailered signs I know are in excess, I think around $6,000, depending on what type of, how many lines of lettering you want, solar powered options as well. So I know they do get up in cost. Stationary permanent signage would probably be a little less because you're subtracting the cost of the trailer.
Okay. Okay, so it's not exorbitant then in terms of if we did put an offer forward to the county to co-own a sign so that we had some assurance that it would not disappear without a pre-consultation. So, pardon?
That information's probably a couple years old. If
Yeah.
I think we'd just work with Scott and see what would be appropriate.
Okay. So Deputy Mayor, would you be willing then to consider, you had mentioned about tabling this motion, and in the interim, we can start discussions with Scott Burns and see where we get to?
I'm happy with that, and I strongly recommend the involvement of the chair of our police service board and Ann Butler as well, representing the group that originally put up the old sign.
Okay.
So whether that's a virtual meeting or an extended delegation to the council as a whole, I'm 6 of one, half dozen of another on that.
Okay. Okay, and Mr. Dunmore, you had something?
Sorry, I stand to be corrected. I just received a text from somebody watching, I guess. So the price is roughly 25 to 30,000 on those signs.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, then, but at least we have an idea of what we're looking at, so that we can have our discussions. So, Deputy Mayor, if you would like, I will endeavor to set something up and we'll try and get some kind of meeting scheduled. I don't know if it's going to be before the next council meeting that we have on the 24th, but at least we'll get a meeting and get some traction. Okay.
I'm fine with that. And can we add this to the to-do list?
Sure.
Okay. And at the appropriate point in the meeting, I have a couple of matters to add to the to-do list that have just occurred to me.
Okay. So, and if you can help me out with tabling a motion, do you put forward tabling, and does somebody else have to second it?
I'll certainly move to table. I don't know if I'll have a seconder.
Okay. So, and Councillor Magdalene said to table. So, moved by Creelman and seconded by Magdalene to table. And we don't vote on that, do we?
Don't think so.
No, I don't think so either. Okay. So, and that's on the list. So thank you for that. And so now we're going through the draft community standards bylaws. And thank you, Mr. Early, for providing us with this comprehensive report. Did you want to add anything else?
No, it was quite an interesting bylaw to pull back together with the time involved in the committee level meetings, and then other emails that have been forwarded out by council after the fact. So I think I've captured everything that's been put out there. There were some conflicts between some of the comments between committees, the public, and council. And I've tried to hit somewhere in the middle. So that's kind of, this the second draft that I've put forward. I think we should also be including the cannabis provisions that have been put in Hamilton's bylaw. I think when it comes to lighting and odor. So I think that anything council does with this should also include those changes. It's on your agenda and schedule.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for the work that you've been doing on this. Is there any questions on the item? Councillor Martin.
Perhaps I missed it, but if someone has left garbage on their property or whatever that is, and they've been notified it has to be done, it isn't done, we take it. What is the timeline? I didn't see a timeline. So from the first time that the bylaw enforcement officer shows up, or the police, or whoever it is who's going to do this, what is the timeline? Do you have a certain amount of time to fix the problem?
We haven't put that in this bylaw. There is a corresponding bylaw enforcement policy later in your agenda that would set out some of that. I would say it would depend on severity, Councillor Martin, whether there's a health risk, whether it's a significant visual issue for surrounding neighbors. But I think we would generally go with warning and then order and then charge.
Okay. And the time could be set by the bylaw enforcement officer then. So if it's immediate, it has to be done immediately. If it's something in the middle of winter, that they have a few months or something like that.
And if you recall, we had one other issue where we had like a semi-trailer on a property and get it off. You weren't going to get it off in the spring. Early spring without creating more damage to the yards and even the roadways. So there needs to be some common sense involved when you are trying to get properties cleaned up.
Okay.
Also
Okay, Councillor Magdalene, you have a comment? Is your mic on?
How's that now?
Yeah, good.
Thank you. Just two comments. I like the bylaw. I think it's largely something that we can defend. I have two questions. One is there's under naturalized areas, it talks about it lists forest gardens, and could we just have some clarity on what a forest garden is?
I believe I took that right off of the person who was requesting that we put in naturalized areas. And I think that was you, Councillor Mankel. I'm trying to find my notes. There was a request that something put in for the naturalized areas. Sorry, I'm just reaching.
Well, I don't know what a forest garden is. If I thought I knew it when I wrote to you, it's kind of ambiguous.
Well, I'm happy to remove it. Like I said, it was a specific definition that was requested by one of the inputters.
The other question I have is about brush piles. Now, I think they're covered under normal farm practices. In a farm situation, it's very common for a farmer to trim their fence lines and remove other boughs and things and create a brush pile, which eventually breaks down and goes back into nature. And I think that that's covered under normal farm practice in the bylaw. However, there are other people, perhaps Sharon Martin's example, who have a large property which would not be considered a farm, I don't think. And I think that having a brush pile would be a normal part of their good management of their property. And so I'm wondering if that's adequately covered here or not.
And again, is someone going to call? Are you going to get a call on that? I mean, I think whether you're overthinking it or not, like if it's a large property like that, it's all forested, you've got a brush pile within the forested area. Do you really anticipate that you would get a call on that? I think what we've said is it's the underbrush that should come out. Unless it's definitely, an emergency situation or a safety situation. I don't see brush piles to be an issue unless you were potentially, creating a 20-foot brush pile right beside your neighbor's house.
Well, I agree. And yet, as council here, we've had to deal with situations where neighbors do not actually get along in a friendly manner. And there seems to be an opportunity for the neighbor to deal with the adjacent person in a deleterious manner because they find something in the bylaw that fits. And so that's why I bring it up. I agree with you completely. People have and will continue to have brush piles, and they're very appropriate, and they're usually put out of sight. But I'm just not too sure that we shouldn't include brush piles in this document.
Okay. Councillor Martin?
Personally, we do have a brush pile, but I always thought that the brush pile was under the fire permit, because that's what we do, is burn up some of this brush. So I always thought that it would be under that, but maybe that's just a personal situation.
Hey, Mr. Early?
Well, I think Councillor Mankelo's point is you can have that brush pile long before you actually take out the fire permit to burn it.
Yeah,
And
yes.
that's when it becomes a nuisance.
Okay. Okay.
Councillor Manklow?
And I think also, Mark, there's a growing interest in returning brush and other vegetable matter to the earth, not just letting it decompose. And so you create a brush pile, not with the intention of ever having a burn necessarily, that it just be a process of nature's regeneration.
Yep. Okay. Hey,
And I
Deputy
think-
Mayor. Sorry. Yes, Mr. Early?
Just respond to Councillor Mankelo's comment. And I think we tried to address that by having the naturalized areas and the fact that you could have underbrush within your property to allow it to decompose. And as long as that didn't create a safety or environmental issue, that's perfectly allowable under the bylaw. So I tried to address that specific issue.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, a number of things. Mark, can you just review, and this is more for the benefit of people watching, the new rules with regard to vehicles. And as I read it, you're looking for a validated or a val tag, as they call it, that is current on any vehicle that is located on properties. Am I correct in that?
That's correct. That's the same process that we have in place now.
And how many vehicles are allowed, or do we actually set that?
We haven't placed a limit. I think a lot of it would also determine how many licensed drivers you have in the household.
Correct. Was there any thought of also making a condition that a vehicle be have proper insurance?
I haven't put that in there. That's certainly an option.
Okay. And what's the, so there's no differentiation between the urban versus rural in terms of the number of vehicles permitted?
That's correct.
Okay. I rather suspect we're going to get lots of submissions on how many vehicles per household or property are appropriate, and whether they are in the process of being repaired or simply abandoned on that property. And I think it's going to be a challenge to defend that or to define it.
I don't disagree. We have that issue now.
Yeah. So in the time that we have this on the website for public comment, the hope is that maybe we get some feedback on that, I would assume.
Yeah, and it's something I can certainly see what other municipalities are doing on that.
Okay. I noticed with interest that the bylaw prohibits the spreading of what we would call sludge or human sewage. Is that correct?
I didn't come across that in my second review. It may be in there from the original submission.
Okay. I think what it says is that human sewage, the term sludge I don't believe is used, can only be disposed of in a manner that is intended for the disposal of such. So the way I read that was that we would not be allowing the spreading of sludge. And I could be quite okay with that, but I found it an interesting part of the bylaw.
But like you said, if it's as long as it's being done in the appropriate manner, and the appropriate manner is with a certificate of approval from the ministry or from OMAFRA, sorry, then that would be the allowance to allow for sludge to be spread. Okay,
I understand. I'm clear on that now. My final question has to do with the fines. The default fine for virtually every potential violation is $3. How did we come to that determination?
That was the original set fines that was in the first draft, John. We did have a bylaw go through where we had set the fines at $250 or $300. And again, I didn't address the fines in this particular draft. I thought that was something I could bring forward later. And I think, again, it goes to the severity of the issue. And I think that when we do apply for set fines, that if we don't have a constant fine running through the bylaw, I think there would be more support at the court level for that we've actually looked at it, engaged severity. So I saw Schedule B to be something to come up in the final bylaw.
Okay. My only observation is that there are some potential violations of greater consequence than others. So it might be worth going through at some stage, and I agree with you. It's always easier just to have the same fine throughout the bylaw, but I think it's arguable that there are certain things that are more consequential than others, and maybe they deserve a slightly higher fine. I wouldn't go much below $300, frankly, for anything in the bylaw.
Okay, so if there's no further questions or comments, we do have a motion that council gives second reading to a bylaw to establish community standards respecting clean yards, refuse disposal, environmental hazards, and nuisances as amended to include cannabis provisions, and that the bylaw come back to council for third reading following an opportunity for resident ratepayers to provide further comments. Could I have someone to move? Moved by Martin and seconded by Creelman. Any further discussion? Okay, I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor?
Yes?
Councillor Mantalo?
Yes?
Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Okay, that's carried. Okay, so now we're on to new business. We have a report. The first item is a COVID-19 treasury update. And Mr. Haluka, did you want to add any further comments to your report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My only comment is, as council is aware, there's daily updates by the province and the federal government. So it is a changing situation. We're just, I think, kind of early into determining the impact on Mono. So my final comment is I'll bring another update 1 month from like the first meeting of council in June, and hopefully we'll have clearer answers in what direction. I mean, as you can see in my report, we have already experienced not an increase in cost, but more a loss in revenues as far as the penalty for taxes, and then the banquet hall rentals, and then the comment as well, the potential risk of losing the rest of the year for the hall rentals. But like I said, I'll bring an up-to-date in June, and we'll have hopefully clear answers on that.
Okay. Any questions of Mr. Haluka's report? Councillor Creelman, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thanks, Les. It's good work. I wonder if, in addition to indicating a savings in fuel, I think of $30,000, there's also that potential of a rebate on such things as the benefits, health benefits package that we offer our employees, and vehicles that are insured. And we understand that in both areas, policyholders may be receiving something back in respect of less driving and less visits to various medical practitioners.
Yes, I agree. That's a fair comment. Well, what the benefit package for our benefits with Sun Life, they're looking at a month-to-month usage. Obviously, we're not using our benefits like we normally would. They're looking at giving us credits starting in June. So hopefully I'll have a number what our credit will be by the end of May. Regarding the vehicle insurance or even our general insurance policy, I do have a discussion ongoing with our broker, with Frank Collins, and we're not the only municipality to have asked that with the effect on our auto policy. They're still to get back to us on that. And hopefully we'll have, like I said, in about a month's time, we'll have some more answers for council.
Okay, Councillor Mantalo?
Your Honor, Les, thank you very much. It's nice to have this because we're all wondering what the implications are as we look to Ottawa and wonder what the implications of all the handouts are there. The tax deferral, is that going to actually cost us anything? I know that they would eventually be, everybody has to eventually pay their taxes, but by not getting them for another 90 days, is that actually costing us anything?
It is, like I mentioned, because we're also deferring the penalty on taxes, so we don't have that month. Not everyone pays their, I mean, majority of people pay their taxes, but we do have a few that don't. So we lose the penalty on that non-payment. And with the installment being deferred, the May installment being deferred to August 26th, so we don't have the penalties on any of that tax arrears. So that amount, as I had reported, is approximately $41,000 of lost penalty revenue.
Okay,
I thought.
so that looks to me like we've got 41,000, bank interest down 31,000, and hall rentals 25 for a total of 97,000. Is that an interim estimate up until I found it a little bit mixed. Is that for the whole year, or what are you thinking about?
The bank interest and the penalty is for the whole year, because I'm assuming that we'll be adding penalty again after the August installment, so for September 1st. Based on the interest rate dropping from approximately 2% to about 0.6, because the bank rate has fallen by 1.5%. That's my projection for the balance of the year, if cash flows continue once we get into September. The hall rental, that's a firm number to the end of June. That number, again, depending how the economy is allowed to open up, that number will change for sure. Hopefully not by a lot, but it could double.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions of Mr. Luca? None for the report. Item 2, the 2020 Tax Rate Bylaw. And is there any questions on that bylaw? Seeing none, then we have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to adopt the estimates of all sums required during the year and to strike the rates of taxation for the year 2020, that it be signed by the mayor and the clerk, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Can I have a mover? Moved by Magdalo and seconded by Martin. Any questions? Call for the vote then. Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Councillor Magdalo?
Yes.
Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Okay, that carries. Amendments to the procedure bylaw. So we have a report from Mr. Simpson. And is there any further information that you wanted to provide, Mr. Simpson?
No, I don't have anything specific over and above the report, though, of course, if there are any questions, we'll certainly try to expand on.
Okay, so is there any questions regarding this? Straightforward. Okay. Seeing none, then we have a motion that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to amend bylaw 2013-18 Town of Mona Procedure Bylaw that be signed by the mayor and the clerk for the Town of Mona, sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have someone to move that? Moved by Creelman and seconded by Martin. No further discussion. I'll call for the vote. Deputy Mayor? Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Magdalo? Councillor Magdalo?
Yes.
Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Okay, that carries. Amendments to the Standing Citizen Advisory Committee policy. And again, Mr. Simpson, thank you for your report. And let's see here. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, as you can see, what I'm recommending is in lieu of a change to the procedure bylaw, an amendment to the committee's policy. I don't believe there's a requirement to amend the bylaw to allow this, as our committees are strictly not governed by the Municipal Act, as this applies, and I have to stress, this is as it applies to advisory committees. So Committee of Adjustment and Police Service Board are regulated under other legislation. So for those committees that are strictly advisory, just needs permission by council in order to conduct this. And of course, general acceptance by the public. So I've written this amendment in such a way that it's not just specific to emergencies, that at any time council thinks that it's advisable and as they deemed in the best interest for committees to meet virtually, they can give that permission at any time and take it away at any time as well.
Okay. Any questions regarding this report? Seeing none then, thank you, Mr. Simpson. We have a motion that council receives a report from the deputy clerk titled Virtual Committee Meetings dated May 5th, 2020, that the Standing Citizen Advisory Committee's policy amended to 28th of April, 2020, be further amended as set out in this report. Could I have someone to move the motion? Moved by Magdalene and seconded by Martin. Any further discussion? Call for the vote then. Deputy Mayor,
Yes?
Councillor Magdalene,
Yes,
Councillor Martin.
Yes.
Okay, that's carried. And motion to amend procedure bylaw electronic participation during times other than an emergency. And so this motion has been circulated with your package. Is there any questions on the motion? Councillor Martin?
Are we there yet? I'm just wondering if we have to have an explanatory note to say what's happening. Could perhaps we reword the motion so we don't need to have an explanation?
Okay, and do you have a suggestion on the rewording?
Well, it's just to make it a bit clearer. What we're saying is basically that, well, we could just use the explanatory note, you know, whereas Mono's current remote meetings are being held under the authority that blah, blah, blah. This will permit remote participation once the emergency is lifted, so long as a quorum is physically present for a meeting. I think that's a perfectly good motion. I'm just...
Madam Mayor, if I can assist.
Yeah.
I put the explanatory note in simply to differentiate between what this motion is attempting to do versus what we're currently doing. It's certainly not intended that the explanatory note be part of the motion, and the wording of the motion is taken directly the motion that I have on the agenda for County Council for Thursday. And it's basically to say that after the emergency period is over, we have the option of having remote participation, in our case, by up to 2 members of council. And this would serve us well in the event somebody is out of the country and can't get back for a meeting, or is ill and still wants to participate in the council meeting, or we have a snowstorm and only 3 of members of council can get to the council chamber. My hope is that the province will revisit this whole notion of remote meetings once the pandemic is over, and quite frankly, have an allowance for remote participation by all members of council going forward, not simply the provision that has been in the Municipal Act now for some 2 years that still requires a physical quorum. So the wording of the motion, I think, is explanatory. It is in part taken directly from the Municipal Act, but I was just trying to be helpful with the explanatory note in trying to differentiate between what we're currently doing and what we would be doing after the emergency. And again, it would be not used all the time, obviously, but as needed.
Does that give you clarification, Councillor Martin?
Yes, I think it's a very good idea because, as you said, during a snowstorm, and we certainly have had those, that might be able to have a meeting. And I think it's great. I just think it's interesting that we have to, and it certainly helped me understand exactly what was being said too. But if everybody's happy with the way it's worded, and then I will be too.
Okay. Mr. Simpson?
There will be some technical challenges that we'll have to overcome to make this happen. So it may be advisable that we bring a report back. Right now, our council chambers are set up and designed to broadcast. So we're now looking at having to be able to run some kind of dual in and out, which again, we're not currently set up to be able to do. We've talked about this briefly. We recognize that there will be technical challenges. We may have to bring in an audiovisual consultant, one we've used to date, and there may be a requirement that we don't yet know for an upgrade in the systems to be able to allow this to occur.
Okay, so that could be a potential budget expenditure for whether or not we want to do that this year, or we have to include it in next year's budget.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
What Freddie's saying may well be correct. I don't doubt that it isn't. I just think that we should have this option available to us. It doesn't mean that we use it. It doesn't mean that we attempt it absent all the steps that Mr. Simpson is suggesting. But I think it's important that we at least have it on our books and we can use it when we're ready to. And it does require an acknowledgement in the legislation that allows us to do this does require us to have an amendment to our procedural bylaw. It doesn't mean that we use it every meeting. I would dare say that it would be used very infrequently and not until we're ready to do so.
Okay, thank you for that. So yes, Councillor Mangtalo. Your mic?
Trying to turn off my mic to save whatever, and I better leave it on. I think that Fred, that's a very interesting caveat, and I suspect that if we had an emergency situation, you wouldn't want to be scurrying around trying to solve the problems that you've identified. That we should solve the technical problems or have a solution in hand. So that if we had a situation where we needed an emergency meeting, we're not in a position of having to say, well, yeah, it's okay, it's on our books, we can do it, it's approved, but we just don't have the ability. And if we had looked ahead a little bit more, we could probably have set this up. So I think I'm in agreement with you, John. I think it's a good motion, and I think that if we do this, that we should, in parallel, have requests that Mr. Simpson look into what is involved in technically in setting this up, so we have that in hand. Whether we actually set it up or not, at least we have an understanding.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
I was going to give an example of this in its simplest form, and that is somebody calling in by speakerphone and remotely participating in a council meeting on something as simple as a speakerphone located in the council chamber. At its most complex nature, it obviously would require some of the things that Fred is referring to.
Okay. So we've had robust discussion. So I want to put this motion on the floor, whereas the Municipal Act Section 238 3.1 allows for procedural bylaws to provide that a member of council can participate electronically in a meeting which is open to the public to the extent and in the manner set out in the bylaw, provided that any such member shall not be counted in determining whether or not a quorum of members is present at any point in time. Be it resolved that MONO's procedural bylaw be amended to permit electronic participation in meetings under Section 238 3.1 going forward. Can I have a mover? Moved by Martin and seconded by Creelman. Any further discussion? Call for the vote then. Deputy Mayor?
Yes?
Councillor Maxlow?
Yes.
Councillor Martin? Okay. You said yes? Okay. So that's carried. And now to item 6, bylaw enforcement policy. So Mr. Early provided us with a report. And Mr. Early, did you have anything further that you wanted to add to your report?
No, again, as I've indicated, this is the first time council's had a bylaw enforcement policy in front of them. If you recall, bylaw enforcement officer was generally run through the county up until about a year ago. And so this is just a follow through on providing some clarity as to the process involved with bylaw enforcement and also the issue of frivolous and vexatious complaints and dismissing those. We probably had about 4 or 5 of those over the years that are vindictive against neighbors, or we've had other situations where we've had someone go on their property, get a complaint, ask them to clean up their property, and then they've gone around the entire municipality and thrown just really petty ones at us and say, well, if you're going to deal with me, then deal with all of these. And I think that too is also a vexatious complaint. But anyway, so that's policy, and again, it's new. Council's never had one before them before.
Okay, thank you. Any questions regarding this report? Deputy Mayor?
So again, more for the benefit of maybe those watching, the system would continue to be complaints driven.
Yes, and I probably should have made that more forceful in the report, but yes, complaint driven.
And to whom is the complaint addressed? Is it does it go through yourself to the bylaw inspection, or can it go directly to the bylaw enforcement officer?
We work that they can go directly to the bylaw enforcement officer. It's more practical and expedient to get the bylaw enforcement officer out there in emergency situations. But that could be clarified in the document.
If in the view of the bylaw enforcement officer, the complaint is vexatious, is there an appeal to that? Presumably to council, I would think.
It would be to council, and I thought we had addressed that in there, Deputy Mayor, that there is within that process that there is still the ultimate decision to be made on an issue by council. If it's not clear, I can certainly revise it to make it clear.
No, it's clear to me, but I just wanted, again, for the benefit of anyone watching, just go through the sort of salient points.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's nothing further, then we have a motion that council receive the report from the CAO clerk titled Bylaw Enforcement Policy dated May 5th, 2020, and that council adopts the bylaw enforcement policy. Could I have a mover? Moved by Mantalo and seconded by Martin. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. Deputy Mayor,
Yes,
Councillor Mantalo? Yes? Is your mic on?
Yes,
Okay, and Councillor Martin? And your mic is saying it's on, but you're not coming through. So, okay, so that's carried. Now we've come to 10:33. Did you want to take a 10-minute recess? Anybody?
how about
Councillor May?
how about a 2-minute stretch our legs?
Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes then.
And I'm wondering if we can't work with Councillor Martin, see if we can correct her mic during that time.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, thank you. So we'll take 5 minutes.
Okay. Andrew, I don't know if there's anything that you can do once you've got the meeting paused into recess, but when you do, if you want to give Councillor Martin a call and see what we can do.
And we're at item 7 of new business, the Monora Park deck tender. And so, Ms. Heaton, report.
I think the memo I've reiterated just basically what we talked about during budget times, that the deck at Monora, the boards and the railings are in need of replacement. Actually, I'll take that back. The railings are not in need of replacement, but they are in need of refurbishing for sure because of all of the rust that we're experiencing out there. A budget was put forward of $90,000 back when we did budget, and we received 6 different bids for the project, all ranging from the low bid of $33,805 right up to $92,000. So we're within, we are within our budget to do the project, and we are ready to go ahead if council agrees with this.
Okay. And any discussion on the item? Yes, Councillor Martin.
Just a question. When replacing a deck, do we need a building permit?
From what I understand, because we're not building a brand new deck, we're just replacing 4 boards. No.
Okay. Well, the reason I'm asking the question is this happened in Cottage area where a deck was taken down, same footprint, everything else, everything was the same except it was safer, and they were fined $300 or something. I can't remember what it was, but that's why I'm asking the question.
No, I appreciate that. I'll double check on that for sure, Councillor Martin. But from my understanding was, because I did check into it with our staff, and I didn't do a complete investigation, a thorough investigation. But their feelings was no, we would not. But I will definitely check into that with the county.
Well, it makes sense not to have to, but there you go.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Batesville?
I don't think I've seen a bid request where there's been such a breadth of bids from 92,000 to 33,000. Sunshine is a reputable group that we've worked with before, and I'm quite happy with them doing the job. But Kim, do you have any idea why some people thought it was going to cost a lot?
I do. The differences in price came when it came, as you can see, when it came to the railings. The railings are to be removed, sandblasted, repainted with epoxy paint, and then reinstalled. And the majority of the people who bid found that those prices were all anywhere from, let me just see here, there it is. They ranged, if we take out Sunshines, they ranged from 25,000 up to 64,755. So it did present a flag to me. So I did contact Sunshine just to verify what they were planning on doing with the railings. And I do have it in writing from them that they are planning to remove the railings, take them off site, sandblast them, paint and reinstall. So I do have that in writing.
Well, that's I'm pleased you've done that, because it's just actually the numbers I think are 9,000 for Sunshine for that part to 64,000 for a performance property. So it's obviously this is a big labor item, and it's obviously that one group thought there was going to be more labor, a lot more labor than the other. I'm quite happy with the pricing, by the way.
Okay, so we have a motion that council for the town of Mono accept the bid price of $33,805 plus HST from Sunshine Landscape Design and Construction for the reconstruction of the Monora Pavilion deck, plus $1,800 plus HST to reclaim used deck boards. Could I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Martin and seconded by Councillor Nix. And thank you, Councillor Nix, for attending. Is there any other discussion? Okay, a call for the vote. Deputy Mayor,
Yes?
Councillor Magtolo,
Yes,
Councillor Martin,
Yes.
Councillor Nix. Councillor Nix, are you there? Yes, thank you.
I think I said yes.
Yeah. Yes, you are. All right. That's carried. Okay, on to item number 8, the Enbridge letter of support. And the report from Mr. Early was submitted. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Mr. Early?
Your Worship, I left my camera off. It's really struggling at my end right now. The Enbridge contacted me about 3 weeks ago, just before the last council meeting. This matter was on an agenda on Schedule A. It was, I don't believe it was discussed at all. Council went through this in 2016 and 2017 and did not lend support to Enbridge Gas. So Mr. Wilson at Enbridge had asked whether I could actually put this forward for council's reconsideration, given that the timeline was I believe it's the end of May, June 2nd, I think, is the timing if you're going to support it. There's 3 projects that are identified on their mapping. It's pretty poor in terms of the mapping. It just kind of shows blobs of higher density uses, and they would correspond to Hockley Village, Rosemont, Cedar Road, and the corridor through the Hockley Valley. So.
Okay. Councillor Nix?
Just so that I understand this, they want a letter of support from us. Does that help them get a grant? And my second part of the question is, does a letter of support from us mean that we are agreeing to defer taxes on any projects they build for 10 years? I wasn't entirely clear on that.
That is my understanding of the process. The first step would be that if council felt that one of these projects was worthy, or all of the projects, they would then have to work up from their end an application to the federal government for funding for those uses. The quid pro quo would be, if that funding opportunity was approved, they would then be seeking council to waive taxes on that project. Their big project right now is Mansfield and Mulmer. It was worked out last time in 2016, 2017, and did not reach approval with the federal government.
Okay, Councillor Nix?
Could I ask a supplementary? I mean, from the town's perspective, let's suppose the project was a gas line along Hockley Road. The gas line currently comes down the 3rd line and does serve some of the houses right at the 3rd line in Hockley Road. But if we gave a letter of support and they extended that gas line down the Hockley Road, first of all, we collect no taxes from them now on a gas line that doesn't exist. So in a sense, it's nothing out of our pocket if we forgave them for 10 years on a gas line that they might build. If they build that gas line and hook up all the way down to Hockley Village and hook up more people to gas, to natural gas, my assumption is, in terms of climate change impacts or anything else, that's all through, well, the benefit of some of our residents, which is a good thing. And we're not, as I understand it, we're not out of pocket anything for 10 years. Yes, we're not collecting taxes, but we don't collect the taxes if the pipeline isn't built. So I guess I'm coming around to sort of thinking, what have we got to lose if we give them a letter of support?
Yeah.
And I think those are fair comments.
Okay. Any other, Deputy Mayor?
This is a question for either Mark or Les. How do taxes on gas lines work? Is it a per foot basis, a X number of dollars per foot?
They show up on the tax assessment roll as an assessed value. So I could find out from the assessment office how they value it, but they do show up on the roll book with a value against them, and then they have their own tax rate applied.
Thanks. I wondered whether they were treated much the same as rail corridors are, but I agree with Fred. I mean, there doesn't appear to be any downside to this.
So with that, yeah, Councillor Mantalo.
Well, just to be the devil's advocate a bit, if they did go ahead with this with the pipeline without our letter of approval and our agreement to defer property taxes, we'd actually would be ahead by some taxes. So it's not that it's a zero-sum game. I do think that it's a good thing to support natural gas as it's in terms of its carbon footprint. It's one of the better ways of dealing with our energy needs. So I would be in support of a letter of support.
Okay. Councillor Martin, did you have any comment?
I would be in support of sending a letter.
Okay. Mr. Early.
Is there a particular project you'd want to support? Like I said, none of the projects ever went through last time. The Mulmer application, which they felt strongly about because of Mansfield, didn't even make it last time. I think they're hoping that if there is a chosen project that they could work up and take forward, as opposed to giving them 4 different projects.
Okay. Councillor Mantalo.
Well, I don't know, but I'd like to consider that the Hockley Valley and Hockley Village is actually one project. I believe Fred has more knowledge about the pipeline than I do, but it presently goes to Hockley Valley, to the Hockley Road on the 3rd line, and the proposal is that it would go along that line, presumably in both directions, but in the easterly direction, it would reach Hockley Village, so that would hit two areas. And I don't know, and I suppose the cost is a big item, and we don't have any. We're just guessing at what would be the costs. Cedar Road, I don't know what that involved.
Okay. Councillor Nix.
Yeah, I was just going to add to Ralph's point. It isn't just the residents of Mono that would benefit, because if they did build a gas pipeline along the Hockley Road, where the density of houses is so-so, I mean, there's certainly denser than the rest of Mono, but once you hit Hockley Village, you've got several hundred residents on the Agila side of the line that could be hooked up to gas.
Okay. So is Councillor Martin.
Yes. And also the potential in the Hockley Village of development there as well. There is a place for development on the Mono side as well. So I think I like that idea.
Okay, so is anyone prepared to put a motion on the floor to direct staff to send a letter of support? Councillor Nix?
Have I got a pecuniary interest here since I live on Hockley Road and the gas line might be going right by my house?
It'll go the other way.
If I don't have a pecuniary interest, I'm willing to move a motion asking staff to write a letter of support.
Would you like an opinion from either the clerk or the CAO of whether or not you have a pecuniary interest?
Sure.
I think
Mr.
it's very, I think you're in common interest with a lot of electors, Fred. And that you
Okay.
would not.
Okay, so, Mr. Simpson, are you able to craft a motion?
Moved by Councillor Nix that council direct staff to prepare a letter of support for Enbridge Gas, stating that Mono Council supports the project in Hockley Village.
I think it was around,
And along Hockley Valley Road, County Road 7 corridor.
Yeah, Hockley,
Yeah, so that, in other words, we're taking 2 out of the list.
Okay.
And could I have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Mantalo. Any further discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry. That's a bad habit. Deputy Mayor
Yes.
and Councillor Mantalo. Yes? You got your mics off.
Yes.
Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Councillor Nix?
yes.
And I'm in favor also. So, Mr. Simpson, you've got that on record. And that carries. And so now we're at number 9, request to waive site plan control at Island Lake Conservation Area. And so this report has come through from Mr. Trotman. And anything that you wanted to highlight in your report? Your mic?
Sorry about that.
Okay.
Just briefly, as I've cited in that report, that there's been other examples of a similar type nature, not identical, but similar in terms of size for structures that have requested exemption, and I've cited the resolution numbers. There's a report, of course, that CIBC prepared that accompanied that report, as well as their letter. If there's any more, take questions if there are any.
Okay. I did have communication from Terry LaRue from CBC, and she wanted to make sure that council knew that this was the last of the items that through their current management plan, there would be no further items being built under that development process. Deputy Mayor, you had your hand up.
Yes. How did we go from one structure to 2 structures, albeit the second structure smaller than the first? I thought this started off as one structure.
Months ago, I believe, as I recall, there was one. I can't remember the exact out dimensions of that structure. Obviously, CDC has made a change and wants 2. They're roughly 30 by 50 size-wise, width to length. Nothing was given to me definitive as to why it went from 2, but they've chosen 2 areas that are sited in an open area of the conservation lands. They don't specifically speak to perimeter natural heritage. There is some in the area because some of the lands north within the conservation area are EP1, but these locations are well beyond 120 meter setback. But no, I don't have a definitive as to why it's 2.
And the other big sticking point originally was the location of the single structure, and they appear to have acknowledged that it should go further to the west, more in the vicinity of the current washroom, or at least closer. But then they come back to a second structure, which is essentially where they wanted to put the first structure that everybody objected to the location of. I find it ironic. I mean, not necessarily opposed to this, but I think we're going to have a number of people scratching their heads and wondering how it went from 1 to 2. And they did the right thing for the first structure, but then they basically plunked a second structure in the area that everybody objected to.
Well, point noted. I mean, this is a report as per their request for waiver, and the recommendation actually separates the two matters in terms of item number 2 and 3 in the recommendation. That is to say, the waiver of site plan control under section 41 of the Act, and then separately the location of the pavilions as they're proposed on map A and B.
So in other words,
It would otherwise be subject to site plan control. So that's the outline of their request, of course, is to have that waived, notwithstanding the comments that Deputy Mayor Kremlin has made.
okay, so we could delay any decision pending clarification as to why they've gone from 1 structure to 2.
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Maytalo.
The previous site, I think, John, was to be more to the east. But it also, if I recall it correctly, it was to be an enclosed building with walls on it and an openings to the north and south. Now, my memory is not perfect on this, but this is an open building, an open pavilion, and I presume that it could be used the same way. In other words, the last one was proposed as being a venue for events, items such as weddings, etc. And I suppose that this one could be used the same way. With being open at 360 degrees, certainly there would not be the sound control that we had at the other one. So I guess my comment is, were we better off a year or so ago than what we have here? I'm uneasy about waiving this, because I think that is one way of allowing residents to be fully aware of it and to for them to give opinions about it. And I would be surprised if they didn't have some thoughts.
Okay, thank you.
There are some reasons on page 3 of their report that alludes to Deputy Mayor Kremlin's inquiry.
Page 3 of,
The planning justification report,
oh, I see, okay.
and it does reference the original or the previous proposal, and in place they've come forward with 2 smaller structures. That's the reference in the report.
Okay. Mr. Early, you had your, maybe not. Okay.
I
Yes,
believe he said he was having video
Oh, okay.
challenges. So
I was just going to mention, you do have them scheduled possibly to come back at your next meeting anyways, at least in terms of a written response for the noise bylaw exemption. I was just going to suggest, unless you're not happy with what's on page 3, that you could ask them for further clarification.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point. Deputy Mayor.
I'm just looking at their map, and something that strikes me as interesting is Pavilion A appears to be south of existing pavilion, and it actually is the smaller of the 2 structures. Pavilion B, which is the one that is potentially a vexation to the neighbors, is actually an additional 600 square feet. I mean, I would feel a lot more comfortable if the larger pavilion was, near the existing pavilion and to the west of the public washroom, and the smaller pavilion, if there is to be one, is the one that is closer to the residents. But I'm happy to hear them out at the next council meeting.
Okay, any other comments? So if that's the case, then we will bring this back to the next meeting and be able to have some more clarification. And maybe, Mr. Trotman, you could let either, if it's Bill Litster that's going to be attending or whoever, give them a heads up that we're going to be asking for further clarification.
That's fine. Yeah, it'll be either Bill Lister or Scott Carafella, both from CBC.
Okay, thank you. So now we're on to Schedule A. And I guess we'll start with Fred Nix. Do you have any items on Schedule A that you wanted to comment on? Do you have your mic?
Here, I found it.
Good.
No, I don't, no, I think I'm fine with Schedule A.
Okay.
I don't have any items, okay?
Okay. Councillor Martin?
I'd like to comment on the Cardinal Woods residents. Well, it's the Watermark community. I'm not sure exactly. It's first of all, it's well put together. It's done properly, and we've had them in the past that aren't. So because you can't have just a continuing list page after page. So they have it on every page exactly what they're talking about. But I'm not sure how we answer back to this petition, because I'm not sure what we could do about it.
Well, I could give a comment that when the petition was sent to me, I did ask for Fred Simpson to keep it on file so that when this item does come back from the club with any proposal, that this comes forward again. And the resident that had designed the whole petition and went door to door was quite pleased that she didn't have to do that again.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments on that item? Deputy Mayor?
Well, I think when some of the citizens appeared before council, we gave them an undertaking to obviously monitor this situation very carefully. And as well, I think there was an undertaking that it would have to be subject to various levels of approval. The Niagara Escarpment Commission, the firearms officials in Ontario, and that we would also be requiring a site plan. And again, all of that being a fairly open process. So to the question of whether there's anything we can do about it, I think there's a lot we can do about it. But my question to David is, what's the status? Have they been back to us with any preliminary drawings or any concepts that they want to go ahead with?
Your mic?
Sorry, I've spoken with Mr. Henderson at the Anglers and Hunters. They're still putting together what would be reports related to a site plan control agreement. It was about a week and a half ago. I haven't heard back from him since, but he indicated to me he would contact me once the club was coming close to a position of submitting a site plan control application. So that could be in the foreseeable few weeks. I don't know at this point.
Okay. Councillor Nix?
And just to add to the points that John brought up, we also did say, John, and I think we said this publicly, they would be required to have a noise study done.
That will be part of their review, and I believe there'll be quite a rigorous one. I don't know they've retained a noise acoustical engineer, but they are seeking to do so. And part of the scope of work of that report by that engineer will be not only site-related acoustical assessment, but also the conceptual design of the building. And apparently there are materials specific to gun clubs out there that are now being utilized to provide, I guess I would call it specialized abatement of noise, but I haven't seen anything to date because, of course, it would be part of a site plan submission.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Thanks, Fred. I did miss the issue of noise, and I think paramount in that is getting a baseline of what the existing sound levels are. And everyone who's contacted me on this has made the observation that the noise levels are somewhat worse now since the berming was done. And the other observation I'd make is that the sound levels are different all over the place. Some people living right next door to it claim not to hear it. People who are halfway to Mono Center claim to hear it. But it's going to be very, very challenging to pin this noise thing down, given the experience that people are having as we speak, as opposed to when the range is enlarged.
I agree. Correct. Okay, is there anything further, Councillor Martin, that you wanted to talk about on Schedule A?
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Manctimo, is there anything that you have? Is your mic on?
Mr. What, if any, application has been put in by them for the expansion, Mr. Tuttle?
Oh, dear.
Yeah. Can you try again, Ralph? Because you're breaking up.
Yes, I'm breaking up in both directions here. This is a question to David. David, what is the present situation of this application, or has there been an application from the North Peel Hunters and Anglers for an expansion?
He already answered that one.
Of course, also with some of the residents in vicinity of the club regarding the noise.
Right, okay. Yes, I'm sorry, Your Honor, but I'm having breaks in my transmission here, and I'm not getting everything.
Okay.
One other item I'd like to bring up, if I could get my screen to cooperate. It's with respect to Ellie's place. This is a farm residence for young people with mental disorders, and it's a very interesting model, which we've seen work in other places. This is a fairly large development. There would be, I figure, about 55 people living on site. I noticed that a part of the planning, David, is to get a water assessment, and I think that needs to be a very rigorous water assessment, because there'll be a large taking of water on this site, presumably from the aquifers underneath the property. I look forward to hearing more about this project.
Yeah, this was simply put on Schedule A's to give council awareness of a pending application for amendment. There is at least one or two other facilities or retreats, wherever you want to characterize them at, out in operation. One of them is in the States. And, so they would be subject to site plan control and amendment to the zoning. And of course, that would entail a number of reports, of course, as part of the review. It seems to be a model that, according to the club, the organization rather, seems to be fairly effective in dealing with certain mental health disorders, particularly in a younger range of persons.
And a follow-up to that comment is, this is an unusual and significant size development if it goes to, if we go ahead with it. And so I do appreciate you putting this out to the council so that they know that. Thank you.
Okay. And Deputy Mayor, did you have anything on Schedule A?
did, and that is the Community Safety and Well-being Plan, which we were expected to complete, and there was confusion as to whether we could do it collectively as a county or whether we had individual municipalities. I'm not certain where that ended up landing, and I'm not certain how far along we are, or whether the extension of time is going to really assist. Mark, maybe you know something about it.
Okay. Where it ended up was, it was felt that it should be done more as a county-wide type plan, and there was general agreement we go that route. And it went from there to being something that the health unit would be preparing, because they actually pretty much have all of the aspects of the community safety well-being plan under their control. So they're quite busy at this time on other matters. Nothing's been done on it since this matter's come, or the what's left, and until we see some change, I think with health unit workload, I don't think you're going to see anything transpire on that. But that was kind of the route that was being looked at, was that the health unit was going to be the primary organizer and preparer of the stuff with county as well.
Okay. So if there's nothing further, I'll ask for that we accept Schedule A to this agenda. Could I have a mover? Moved by Creelman, seconded by Martin. And Deputy Mayor, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Mactolo?
Yes.
Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Councillor Nix?
Yes.
Okay, that's carried. And so now we're on to reports of council and staff. So we'll start with Mr. Luca. Is there anything that you have to add? There you are.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just the one item. The financial audit is complete. It's probably the first time ever the auditors have never stepped foot in a building, but with different transferring of files and that, they were able to complete the audit. At the moment, they're working on completing the financial statements, and hopefully we can have them come to council at our normal time, usually July or August.
Okay, good.
That's it.
Okay. Ms. Heaton, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
Just bringing council up to date on trail openings. As you can, I'm sure you've heard that the province on the weekend reopened their parks and their conservation areas. We have been getting questions. I was yesterday, had a few emails and phone calls in regards to why Island Lake Trail was not open as of yet because of the announcement on the weekend. And it turns out Island Lake Trail, that conservation area is not one of the province's conservation areas. So to date, Island Lake has not put anything out as to when they will be opening up. However, we have heard from the Bruce Trail, and they are opening up, I believe it's as of this Friday. The county just this morning also released a statement that they're going to be reopening the county forest and the rail trail as of Tuesday, May the 19th at 12 noon. Monocliffs Provincial Park should be opening this week sometime. So we're pretty much going to be back on with our trails again, except for Island Lake, which we haven't heard anything from Credit Valley as to when they plan on reopening that back up. Other than that, tomorrow I'm going to be participating in a workshop put on by the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association in regards to infection prevention and control, and measures that we have to take for disinfecting upon the reopening of our facilities. So I'll be participating in that. And on Friday, I sat in with Parks and Recreation Ontario in a meeting with a number of rural other directors, and everyone is of the same concern that once the province decides to reopen park facilities, is what's the protocol going to be for keeping playground equipment and benches and picnic tables and all of that clean. So we're waiting upon direction from the province, whether it's going to come from them directly or the health unit. We're not sure, but all directors are in the same boat right now as to feeling a little overwhelmed with what our responsibilities are going to be and how we're going to make everything happen once things do reopen up. Other than that, that's about it. Continuing to monitor the trails within Mono, and as always, people are great and they are following distancing guidelines, and everyone's pretty friendly up there. So.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Trotman, did you have anything that you wanted to report on?
Just briefly to update Mr. Deputy Creelman with respect to the Orangeville Highlands Phase 2. So this, of course, as you may recall, is going to a hearing on May 25th this year. It's a 10-day hearing. There were updated comments, the first round submission from the various departments and agencies that were requested comments. So they have been weighed, peer reviewed. There may be a response to those from the various agencies leading up to that hearing date. I will let you know. I've asked and made a request for that through CBC and also through the LPAT for the issues list. You may hear my phone ringing in the background. I apologize. Beyond that, there's a PPS review, which is looming. So I'll be hearing sooner than later, I guess, from the province on comments for that particular initiative, provincial initiative. The Dufferin County OP continues, albeit under COVID restrictions, of course, but there will be another meeting, virtual meeting, such as these with the area planners on May 15th. That's Friday. And there's a few applications or development applications that have been, I guess you could say, in a holding pattern to get to committee and council or through public meeting review that are obviously anxious to try and move forward. But once we have permission to do that, they will be proceeding, of course. So that's really a bit of an update I have. And of course, as the matters in the pending list that council looked at earlier today, that I guess I'll be reviewing with Mr. Early in short order. So that's my update for you, council.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dunmore.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just regarding an update on how Tree Day went, a big shout out to Christine in the Treasury Department. She put together a great COVID-19 response to the pickup. We put 110 people through, 6,600 trees went out of the shop over a course of 3 days. So great job by everybody that worked on that. Residents were very happy. We just got confirmation from Walmart that we were able to order some masks. So we're hoping that they do show up. We're starting to work, Mark and the directors and I will be working on COVID-19 health and safety responses with respect to projects and jobs that are do not allow 2 meter separations. So we're working on all of those to put out to staff. Major maintenance programs are all on schedule. Grading, calcium, and maintenance gravel will all start in the coming weeks. Bridge 39, located on Mono-Adula Town Line, will be starting late May. We're trying to pin down the actual closure date with some meetings this week, but we have let the residents know that it is coming up, and by June 1st we should have probably have the Mono-Adula Town Line closed down. SCADA upgrades, they'll commence on our drinking water plants on May 27th is our startup meeting. With respect to the Highway 9 water main install, we're still awaiting a couple of signatures, key signatures that are required for the implementation. The commercial business owners in the Highway 9 area are working through the COVID-19 and trying to get lawyer and legal meetings set up to review our documents. So those are we're on top of that and continuing to move as fast as possible. The landfill will open as per the schedule that was agreed to and approved by council in the past budget. Those dates are on the website, social media platforms, and we will be bringing a dozer in to take ships that were all shipped last year and do some corrective drainage works as well. With the expansion on the essential work orders, the blind line culvert installs and the Rosemont urbanization projects will be let to tender in the coming weeks, and appropriate letters will be sent out to residents. And we've also on the Rosemont and the Bridge 39, we've also forwarded the project and the project dates to the township of Agila-Tosaranio for them to put on their agenda as well. Other than that, unless council has any questions, that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you very much. Mr. Simpson, did you have anything?
No, I have nothing to report.
Okay. And Mr. Early, are you still with us?
I'm still with you.
Oh,
Just following up on some of the other comments that have been made. I think we're all trying to evaluate where our new normal is going to be coming out of COVID-19. With the ability for the municipalities to try to deal with the situation today, it's been phenomenal in terms of the take up on video conferencing and what that and online processes that have morphed from where we started in the beginning of March, I guess. So at a staff level, we're certainly looking at where we're going to be coming out of this. For instance, we're going to need a glass or plexiglass screen at the counter as we move forward. But again, we're trying to develop a county-wide approach to how we come out of this, so that the municipalities in Dufferin have similar mechanisms in place and workshop changes, so that they're similar, so we don't get into well, Mulmer's doing this and Mono's doing this and the county's doing this. So we're trying to we've started those discussions and we're trying to see where our new normal is. County review study, the services review study that you've all participated in. Laura and John, you may be aware from your county agendas that Sonia's bringing a report forward on that. One of the things they're recommending is a change as to what is evaluated at the county level. There was two parts. There was the external review with how we tie into the county with our services, but there was also the internal workings of the county. It's kind of part A, part B. They've seen some significant changes as to how they think that their services are going to be coming out of COVID-19. So they're looking at making changes to that study. We've been asked as the local municipalities whether there's opportunities for us to look at how that's going to affect us. And the obvious one is building permits. The county launched their online building permit process maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks before COVID-19 started. And they are basically at a point now where they're almost fully functional on online building permit applications. So it was well timed and it's worked out, but it definitely changes the services review study. So we're looking at that. We actually had a DMOA meeting, a virtual DMOA meeting on Friday. It went rather well. What was lost though is the general networking that you get at coffee breaks, one-on-ones with certain people that you lose on a video conference. And then finally, just a comment that was made through the, I guess, the EMCs across the province. They're starting to see a lot more psychological impacts, even with the municipal staff, and especially on the EMCs. And just trying, I know that Councillor Manctalo and Deputy Mayor Creelman are looking at that as well in terms of their reports for the website. And just on that, just to, we did hold a coffee break with all staff on Friday, just to kind of get some normal back. The only rule was no business, and let's just have a chat as if we were in the office. So, and it went rather well. So that's my report.
Well, that's great. It sounds like you've got a lot of things in place, and you've been working diligently to try and keep everything going and planning for the future. So on to reports from councillors. Councillor Nix, do you have anything?
Yeah, just a couple of quick items. A week ago Saturday, the weather was beautiful, and Hockley Road became a bit of a zoo with motorcycles, cars, car rallies. There was one that went by with probably over 50 cars in it, cyclists and walkers. I had some neighbors come and approach me to see if there's something that could be done. I dissuaded them from seeing if we could rent one of those spiky things to put across the road, because I don't think that would work. But John Creelman wrote a very good letter and sent it out to the former members of the Community Safety Task Force people and the Police Services Board people, and the Deferred OPP commander and the county. And I just want to report that I think as a result of that letter, John, in the past week, I mean, immediately the day after you sent your letter, maybe it was 2 days, we had one of those radar triggered speed signs put at the 4th line in Hockley Road. It goes off if you're below 70 kilometers an hour, but if you're above 70 kilometers an hour, it flashes your speed at you. And I have dutifully stood out on the Hockley Road and to observe the impact it has on traffic. And it does slow them down. In an easterly direction, as they come around the corner, they typically are doing about 80 kilometers an hour. And so, yeah, my wife just said 85, but they all seem to be slowing down as they see that sign flashing at them. So it is effective. The other thing too, that 3 days after John's letter, as I went into town, and an hour and a half later came back from town, there was an OPP officer parked on the Hockley Road, right at our own building, where the speed limit's 50 kilometers an hour. The only problem is on that day, I really appreciate the OPP doing that, but it was more or less almost blizzard conditions, and there was no motorcycles, there wasn't a lot of traffic, and nobody was speeding, but I did appreciate the effort. The second thing I should report on, and I sent you all an email on this, on the weekend we had a letter of resignation from Brad Lamash, our chief at the Shelburne District Fire Board, which really disappoints me. Brad has done a terrific job at the fire board, and he's given us a month's notice. So we'll be talking about this tomorrow, Sharon, you and I. We have a Shelburne District Fire Board meeting on Zoom, and we're going to go in camera. My worry, and maybe this is premature, but having sat on the last hiring committee, we've got 1 month to find a new fire chief. You know, by the time you get the ads written up, get them out there, receive the applications, try to review them, and you have to do this all virtually this time, and then do interviews of the selected 3. This is tight, so I'm a bit worried. The other thing is, just to expand on what Kim said, yeah, we did get a letter from the Bruce Trail. They're going to open the Bruce Trail in stages. It can't be all opened at once because some of it goes through private lands. Some of it goes through conservation areas, not provincial, but conservation authority areas that may or may not be open yet, but they are going to start to open it soon. And the last thing I was going to mention, Mike, for you, the tree sales you had were great. And you'll be happy to know that 100 of those trees I planted, that's the ones that Dave Moore picked up. They're all nicely planted and patted down for the summer. That's all I have.
Thank you. So Councillor Martin.
There may be some news about Island Lake opening by Friday. I'm also disappointed in Brad's resignation, and I have the same concerns that Councillor Nix has about replacing him in that short a time. It's pretty close. And really, I don't have anything else.
Okay. Councillor Maxwell.
I share Councillor Nix's concerns about motorcycles on the Hockey Valley Road. This is, in my perception, doing nothing but getting worse. I was there on the weekend, and it was, you know, if I lived there, I'd probably put my house up for sale. It's something I know, John, it has been on your ledger to do, and we have to find a solution to it. I have a number of other items to comment on. One is the Board of Health. The Wellington Deferred Guelph Board of Health is radically changed at the moment. They had, as everybody knows, many programs from dental care to water monitoring of wells and restaurants, etc. Almost all these programs are now not functioning. The 240 odd full-time employees of the board have all been transferred to other work. It basically involved contact tracing and other issues with respect to the COVID. So this has been a radical change for the Board of Health. And Nicola Mercer gave us a talk. We had a closed session, I guess it was, a conference call session. And then we had a board meeting, or a finance meeting very recently. She's very concerned because it really means that what the Board of Health is there to do is not going to be done anymore. And this is probably going to go on, she suspects, for some time. You all know the estimates, 1 to 2 years before we're into anything that approaches a new normal. So this is a big issue. I just want you to be aware that the board is not as it used to be. It's functioning. I think it's functioning within the new parameters of COVID pretty well, although it's hard for me to tell. There's a lot of overtime work being done there. There's been no feedback from the government at the moment about budgetary assistance, and there will certainly have to be because they're going to be, I don't know how much, but they're going to be, they need a last haluka there to come up with an estimate. I'd like to know where we're standing. So that's big. Thank you, Mark, for your assistance with the mental health issues, and I applaud you for dealing with the staff and the ways to be supportive. It's really hard to be supportive when everybody's off at another site. It's hard it's hard to know how much stress somebody has until they have that breakdown and tears when they realize that they are upset about things. So this has gone on for 2 months now. The longer it goes on, the longer it's probably going to be a problem with respect to mental health. As you know, we did ask, and this was done through Mark for anonymity, we did ask for some input from staff, and we got well over a dozen different suggestions about ideas that they personally found useful as stress relievers or as means of supporting the mental health, in addition to walking, because walking was our third COVID message for the website. So we'll put this information out on the website likely the next day or two. John and I continue to do this with Mark's assistance, and that's appreciated. The final item is the pollinator garden. The volunteers are interested in working in the garden, and the garden does under community gardens, it is an accepted community garden, and so we're quite within the provincial guidelines. We have, and I particularly have significant concern because most of the people who work in the garden are in the age group where the mortality rates are very high, and so we put out a protocol which will ask people to distance, use masks, hand wash, limit of 5 people, etc. And this protocol will be delivered to everybody, and I'll personally go over it with each group of 5 for the first few times to make sure people understand. It's basically about transmission and not transmitting through speaking, coughing, sneezing, or through contact transmission. So we're going to start next week. Darcy has installed a sink, and we should have a faucets and everything running, so we have running water, and we'll have some of the supplies that have been provided to the town as a sanitizer on site, and we'll have very limited use of the shed. We'll use our own equipment. If we have to share a piece of equipment, it'll be sanitized before another person uses it. So I think that we're on board there for minimizing the risk to various volunteers. When Utah put out a request for volunteers, I think there were 14 who said they'd like to come. So the plan is to have a 5 on say Tuesday and a 5 on Thursday, etc. And so we'll be so far distance we probably don't need to wear a mask, but we'll have the mask wearing is something that we decided to do. And that's it, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I've got a number of things. One is police service boards. And as council will recall, there was a Solicitor General's consultation on the future of police service boards that was held in Aurelia that literally only one person from Dufferin County was able to attend due to a snowstorm. So we really didn't get a chance to put our oar in the water insofar as what we perceived the future of our local board and the context of the push towards detachment boards. I'm recommending that we send Minister Jones a letter under the mayor's signature, basically outlining a model that would respect the good work that the individual boards are doing while incorporating maybe some other functions in what the province wants to see us do by virtue of a detachment board. If we go to a 100% detachment model, my fear and the fear of others who are more knowledgeable about police service boards than I am is that it will be subsumed by transition issues that will be facing Orangeville and potentially Shelburne for a good year or more to come. And if we can't keep our local identity, it will be very hard to continue the sort of excellent rapport that we have with the OPP. So I think we have to come up with a compromise that has a role for the municipalities acting together, but at the same time respecting what we do as a local board. One of the big issues is going to be representation. And AMO has come out with a discussion paper that frankly worries me, as it does the chair of our police service board, in as much as they see only 2 types of representatives on police service boards, a member of municipal staff representing the municipality, and or a publicly appointed or an individual appointed by the local municipality. The problem with that is that it precludes elected persons such as myself, for no explicable reason. We can't see why they don't like that. But at the same time, the question would become, if we had a detachment board, does each municipality have one person and one vote? And it remains to be seen how that would roll out. So again, another really good reason for continuing the status quo, with maybe a little more cooperation with the individual police service boards throughout the Dufferin County. We already meet once or twice a year as a group, but it's more for educational purposes. So I just want to put that issue on everyone's agenda. I don't think anything is going to happen quickly, but I think we need to be indicating very, very soon what Mono's position is, and I would suggest maybe I could help come up with something and then circulate it to you, and we could pick it up at the next council meeting. Don't know how you feel about that.
I think that's a great idea, John, and I think we should, within the letter, request a conference call with the minister, or whether or not we can do a virtual meeting with her, just to further clarify the potential pitfalls in this change, if that's what's being considered. So yeah. I'm very much in favor. Anyone else have any comments? Nope. Okay.
Second issue is provincial offences administration. We have heard absolutely nothing, to the best of my knowledge, as to what is occurring with regard to the administration of provincial offences. We know only that the courts are closed. There is little or no activity that is being done to deal with ongoing resolution discussions that could occur over the telephone. The paperwork is piling up, to the best of my knowledge. And in the Central West Judicial District, my informants tell me that there is a backlog now of 60,000 cases. Now, they're not all here, but I worry very much about how activity has come to a complete standstill, and the fact that the town of Caledon, who administers the service for Dufferin municipalities, has yet to communicate with us as to what they're doing. I've informally reached out to try and urge them to send us a report, but so far we have not received anything, again, to the best of my knowledge.
Mr. Early?
Yeah, just very quickly on that, Deputy Mayor. Pam reported during our meeting on Friday that there is no POA staff right now at Caledon. That's probably why you're not hearing anything, but that maybe June they're looking to I guess get reinitiated. So that was all Pam had to say. So.
Well, I can add to that, and that is that the Caledon POA staff who are situated in the Dufferin County building, there's 3 full-time, one of whom was a very senior, experienced member of the staff, what turned out to be the person that they have laid off, which I think was unfortunate. But they're not there, and moreover, no one is answering the phones. So the county is getting an inordinate number of phone calls by ordinary citizens with regard to how do they pay their fines, when is their court date, and so forth and so on. So the silence from Caledon, in fact, is adding to the workload of the county. And I have 2 more quick things. Can I ask that we add the following to our to-do list? One is to follow up on the letter to the Minister of Transportation about an increase in POA fines. because our revenues are going to be impacted quite dramatically by this inactivity that is ongoing, as well as follow up on the MTO letter to the minister and visit to the minister with regard to individual projects in the town. I hope we don't lose sight of that. And lastly, I have been approached by a couple of potential internet providers and or customers about either temporary or permanent small scale tower locations. And in particular, there's an entity that is interested in doing a pilot. It would be temporary in nature at the Baker property, and it would be directed towards people in Hockley Valley who currently have absolutely terrible internet connectivity. And there is also interest in accessing our water tower. Can I have a go ahead to talk to Mike Dunmore about these applications, or these expressions of interest, I think would be the best way of putting it. And I think we're going to have to come up with a protocol as to how we deal with them.
If I would be able to comment first, I know we had always had the water tower as being an option, and any of the big providers already had other locations and it wasn't going to be useful. Is there any consideration that the tower could actually do what you are proposing at the Hockley, the Baker property, Hockley property? Because of my absolute distaste for towers unless they're absolutely necessary.
The proposed temporary tower at the Baker property would be something in the order of 60 feet in height. So it would not be a dramatic blot on the landscape. I do not know the answer to the question of whether the water tower would do the same thing, but there is growing interest out there, and you know, I think we just need to come up with a way of processing the requests as they come in, because I think they are going to start coming in.
Right.
60 feet is a very small. I mean, people have towers on their property for line of sight internet that are in that range, but this is supposedly a temporary structure only to try and determine whether or not the technology is feasible.
Is your task force a point of that maybe that would be something that they would be able to advise us on how we should choose the process, the protocols, etc.?
Yeah, I think that's entirely possible. We obviously haven't been meeting, and now that we have the clarification as to committees of council being able to have virtual meetings of one kind or another, we can probably get going again and fairly quickly. But I know that the one potential client, and I can think of 3 others in the same vicinity, would be really keen on doing something at Baker fairly quickly. The other principle I think we need to maintain is that anything that we do with towers has to be on the basis of co-location ability. In other words, we aren't seeing a proliferation of towers simply for the benefit of one provider, but other providers can gain access to those towers.
Yeah, definitely understood. Mr. Early?
I was going to say, you do have a telecommunications protocol policy. I don't know how well you've gone through that, John, or whether your committee has. My concern my concern would be that if we're going to start bending the rules for the small local providers through the telecommunications protocol, and I'm not saying that that's what you're proposing at this time, but just the caution that if we are going to be moving to that process, that you will have the bigger boys looking in on it too, because we regularly put them through that protocol.
And I had a lengthy discussion with the Bell representative as a follow-up to the actions that council took with regard to their requests for support. And they are definitely looking at further expansion of their 5G hybrid system that is now available to some but not all Mono residents. So again, I think I'll have a look at that protocol and see whether it's applicable, but I think we are entering an era where it's gone from 0 maybe to 70 fairly quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Just as long as we try to push the envelope in terms of alternate forms of the installations as opposed to just towers. So
Agreed.
I think we're not taking advantage of many of the high points that are available and locations, citing, just as close as Agilitas. There's one particular farm that has multiple silos with multiple, obviously, internet cell equipment on them. So they could be also a form of rental income for a property owner. But anyway, Mr. Trotman, I see that you're here.
Well, just briefly weigh in and maybe provide a bit of clarity. So the telecommunications protocol we have under section or clause 7 does speak to minor insignificant installations. And the document generally speaks to co-locate. And of course, that's the one that was approved by council in 2002. So, but notwithstanding concerns raised, I'm just making note that there is some language provision in that protocol that speaks to those two items.
Yeah.
David, can you send me a copy of that?
Sure, I will do that. I'll give you the link for it and I'll send it to you. I'll send it to all council.
Okay, thank you. So is there anything else, John?
Don't let me think of anything else.
Okay, so just wanted to make sure that Fred
I'm good.
Simpson, thanks. Fred Simpson's got those 2 items you wanted added to our list of to-dos.
Yes, we've got the letter to the Solicitor General regarding the increase to the POA fines, and the one to the Minister of Transportation on the projects and safety issues on the highways.
Okay, good. All right then, so is there any other business? As you can tell, I have nothing because I don't go anywhere because I'm in quarantine, right? As we all are. Or isolation, that would be the better way. So if there's nothing further, then we can close off. So that we introduce and give the necessary readings to a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Town of Mono in session VC4-2020 held on 12th of May 2020, that it be signed by the mayor and the clerk and sealed and engrossed in the bylaw book. Could I have a mover? Moved by Magtalo and seconded by Creelman. And how do you vote, Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Councillor Magtalo?
Yes,
Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Councillor Nix?
Yes.
Okay, that's carried. And thank you very much, everybody. And we're going to close off at 12:01 p.m. to enjoy the sunshine. So moved by Nix and seconded by Martin. And we're all in favor. And so that carries.
It does.
Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you all very much.